Hello there, book clubbers. Oh, it's a special episode. It is another chance for us. I think the ninth time we've done this, where we
Is
get
it?
to, I think it might be eighth or ninth. I don't think we did it for the first one. Anyway,
I don't know if we did
somebody
for
else
this
can
first.
count. We're here with Stephen Erikson, the author of
Hello.
the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Thank you, Stephen, for being with us again.
Well, thank
Here
you
we are.
for persevering over 10 entire novels in 3 years. So
It was very difficult for us to literally read our favorite stories of all time.
It didn't feel so much as we were persevering as it was the only thing a lot of the times that felt like gave me strength to persevere. Everything else happening.
Very well said,
Yeah.
Lana. Very well said. I want to start this time, because we have to, by publicly here thanking you for the dedication.
you're welcome.
It is the most overwhelming, special thing I can think. Len and I both agree it is unexpected and beautiful, and it touched us in a profound way. And so thank you for that. It's just extraordinary.
Well, like I said, you're welcome. And I hope I gave some kind of context to it with my comments
Yeah.
of late on your discussions of various chapters. So yeah, it has meant a lot. It's been where I got refueled in a sense. I mean, why wouldn't I dedicate this stuff?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like being able to be like, I don't know, brought so immediately brought to tears and so impactful in a way. We don't have to ring it out. I know, especially in your comments, you're like, let's talk about this now so we don't talk about it later. But I can't help but echo Jeff and just wanting to tell you very directly. I think a lot of times we get out of these interviews and I'm kind of like, was that an interview or just like a heaping of praise and trying to make sure that this is a compelling conversation for you? And we're sort of getting to the heart of some stuff. But now that we're done, the core 10, I'm not going to say how much we appreciated it, how much I think about it, how much fodder for pondering and considering and even seeing things in the world and digesting them, the core themes of the book coming back to me again and again, of the hard parts of not looking away and what it takes to persevere for a vision for a greater cause than yourself. There's just so many pieces that will stay with me forever. So I'm very pleased that we get the opportunity, that you give us the opportunity to be able to say thank you straight to your face.
Yeah. I think it's the dream that every person has when a piece of art affects them in a profound way, that somehow, in some way, that appreciation can be filtered back to the artist that created that work. And the fact that we get an opportunity to directly tell you how much this stuff meant to us and how much reading these books has improved our lives and had such a big effect on us. That is such a gift to be able to just,
Well, I mean, it goes both ways though, right? So listening to you discussing various scenes, chapters, and then the novels and all the rest, it helps sort of, I guess, a kind of reaffirmation that at least in the case of two people, this thing reached and did what it was intended to do. And so you do not believe the extent to it. Oh, well, you must, because you write, but the isolation that exists with writers, and how in many ways the internet has changed that dynamic considerably. Sometimes not always for good, right? But it has drawn the actual individual creator into the discussion in ways that didn't exist before. And in some ways, that dispels a lot of the mystery, because it's the aloof artist is certainly the cliche that one expects, and you'll still get that. I mean, in some ways, I suspect later on you're gonna ask me about what do I suggest you read next. And I've been thinking about that a lot. But one thing to just bear in mind in terms of decision making is those artists with whom you can speak. In other words, not dead artists.
Yeah.
Or there's a value there. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, I can think of a few dead artists that would be really useful for you to read their stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of, it goes both ways, I suppose. But at the very least, a palate cleanser, I think, probably would be a fair direction.
I can't wait to hear about your specific thoughts. Knowing that you get to be, one of the things of the internet, our ability to ask you a bunch of questions, but you also get to, as an author, maybe perceive how people read your books and digest your books in a much more tangible way. When I look back at the time that we spent in these 10 books, there are obviously plot lines that resonate with me, or action that was most exciting to me, characters that I adored. But the parts that I think about the most are those overarching themes. Being able to witness how people digest things. Do you ever find yourself frustrated if people get too hung up on specifics or plot nuances when you've invested so much time in painting a bigger picture?
I don't know about frustrated. Okay, frustrated. Yeah. It's hard to explain, but it's like the discussion that AP sort of touched on when you spoke to him last. That element of the crippled God as the teller of the story, and how, if you're going to be pedantic about it, the questions arise that, how could the crippled God know about this person or get into the head of that person and all the rest? Which isn't even a question if the crippled God was simply a disembodied narrator, right?
Right.
That question wouldn't arise. But because it's been personified, it sort of leads some people into that pedantry of well, how is this possible, kind of thing.
Well, he is a god.
And that is kind of frustrating. Well, yeah, exactly. But of course, there's a lot more to it. I was on Sunday, I think. I was talking with AP. We have a sort of a Sunday chat, me, AP, and Ian Eslamont. And I mentioned that I could sort of, to talk about the crippled God as a narrator, as the teller of the story. I was describing to him that I could describe it, in this particular way, and he was just sitting there shaking his head, because he was basically saying, "It's not going to help, but I'll try it anyways." Are you guys up for this? I can talk about this?
Absolutely.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So imagine taking a strip of paper, just like that, and on one end writing Crippled God, and then flipping the paper, and on this end writing Stephen Erikson, Malazan Book of the Fallen. Okay? Now twist the page, twist the paper, bring the ends together and tape it. And then take a pen, and right where the Crippled God is written, start drawing a line, and don't let the pen leave the paper. And you will follow all the way along, and you'll come all the way to Stephen Erikson, the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Basically, it's a Mobius loop, right? And so I was describing that. What if I use that kind of imagery for the readers? And like I say, AP was just shaking his head, saying it's still not going to work. But in a way,
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
No.
You. I wanted to dig deeper into that, but you're going to. So go ahead.
Yeah, but if you then give me your question, I'll know where to dig deeper.
Okay, so in that sense, I think you're creating the Mobius strip. You're putting the twist there to create some moment in time where there is you put some tension into it, right? There's some twist that is not entirely Stephen Erikson and is not entirely the Crippled God, but there is an intersection that is not a distinct point, but a progression. Is that a fair interpretation of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, it partly. The twist is only to create the Mobius loop, right? So it's not. There's no plot twist. There's no thematic.
No, I don't mean it
twist
as
at all.
I don't. Yeah,
An intermingling.
yeah,
Yeah, or infolding in a sense. And so that's why Toll of Hounds is the cipher for the series, because that is a Mobius loop within the Mobius loop of the entire series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's Krupp playing the same role as the Crippled God plays in the full series, by doing it for one novel. And of course, even there are things that he describes that he could not possibly know within the diegetic world, right? But he does. So that's what, and it's framed with him talking to Cruel. So you've got that Mobius strip at work there.
Did you?
So that's why it's kind of the cipher for the whole thing.
The thing if I could, Jeff, one of the things that I think is interesting about this, and, you know, even when I think about, you know, logic hounds that really want it to be perfect, you know, I've got in there, AP chatted to us about magic systems, and I'm going to ask you about that later. But even within the world that you built, in the description of the one scene where Mail could see through a single tear of somebody, I think there's something so beautiful, and like the Banishar reveal of like, oh, I'm here with this guy because the thing that is my ailment is not as visible. It's this dependence on alcohol that is still a way in which I am crippled in my body and my mind or my spirit. I feel like the Crippled God being able to see through everybody's eyes, those two things together, even if I were to like logic it away somehow, I feel like that's baked in a way that is so beautiful. Everybody has something that's affecting them. He can see through everybody's minds because nobody is a perfect and whole and flawless individual. And through that lens, that is some amount of crippling to what could be perfection in that one person's life. So I think it's interesting to see both sides of that.
And nor is he perfect. And that's kind of the main point, which is, this is where it goes meta. Okay. So where it steps outside the fictional creation. We'll stick with writers, but it probably applies to all artists, but we are all as especially fiction writers, to a lesser extent as nonfiction, although that's arguably not the case, but we're all world builders. But in a sense, we're actually more like world rebuilders. And so you have a kind of omniscient, omnipotent ability when you're looking at that blank page. You can create anything, right? But for me, I always needed the constant reminder that if I'm taking on this role of a god in the creation of this work, I'm a flawed god. I'm a flawed individual, and probably in keeping with most artistic, creative people, I'm deeply flawed, right? So there's that broken element, which I always needed to keep foremost in my mind, to not let, I guess, the ego of creation sort of run wild and indulge itself. So in that respect, it's all about the creative process within a broken context, within an imperfect context. And that's not something to sort of gloss over or shy away from. It needs to be front and center. At least that's what I did with the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I made it front and center. And which is why I never really worried about, timeline issues and inconsistencies and all the rest. If anything, that just underscored the imperfection of the entire process. And I'm not there to sort of fix those imperfections. I'm there to actually celebrate those imperfections. And that's why, we see so many broken characters, and why there would be times when I would pick, say, one of the soldiers in one of the squads and just roll into a 3 or 4 paragraph backstory, which would sort of illuminate the brokenness of their origins, and that's not in a sense nailing one particular character. That's basically every man, every woman. They have their stories, and those stories have value, and then those stories and that experience is what drives what they are doing now and what we are seeing now. And so it's it's all about a kind of anguish that is to me almost central to the human condition. So and that's kind of why I do get frustrated on occasion when people are talking specifically about the Crippled God or Krupp and Toll the Hounds or whatever, because it's this is all, at least it's an imperfect and flawed attempt to be as universal as possible.
It's such a beautiful concept, and I find myself sitting here listening to you and extending the metaphor. And perhaps you can tell me I'm going too far, but if that Mobius strip connects you, the author, to the Crippled God as the narrator, then this God has been pulled from this other world, right? And chained to this one until the end when he is finally allowed to leave. There's it's beautiful and poignant, and I'm sure not unintentional.
No, I mean, we drape chains on ourselves, and our life experience has draped chains upon us. And those are the things that are, they're not only holding us in place, but they're also holding us down. And those are two very different things. And so the eventual freeing at the end of the novel was as much my achieving freedom as it was the Crippled God, because I had come to the end of the series, and everything I had intended, I finally arrived there, and it was time to break those chains and lift free of it. And the amazing thing was, I remember very, very distinctly me finishing the novel. I was in a Cafe Nero, I think, in was it Cafe Nero? Anyways, it might have been on the high street in Falmouth in Cornwall, and where I normally sat, I had a big window on looking onto the high street, so all these crowds moving back and forth. And I finished, and I finished the closing poem that finally closed everything off and brought it full circle. And I sat back and I looked out onto the street, and I just felt this weight lift off me. It was extraordinary. It's like, and I didn't realize that I'd had that weight and been carrying the pressure of the 10 books all this time. And then it made me then think back to, there are two particular scenes, two events in The Crippled God, the last book, that had been sitting in my head since probably sometime in the writing of Gardens of the Moon. And those were the two scenes I was writing towards. And I knew I couldn't rush there, because if I rushed to those scenes, the emotional impact would not be sufficient for what I was attempting. And can I describe those two scenes? You can probably guess which ones they are. Yeah? Okay, well.
I bet we could guess, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, I know. I'm like staying muted because, just to interject for one tiny thing, it is so, I'm like, maybe I'm just a sap, or maybe work has just been really hard, but like feeling that freedom and that delight in having finished a massive creative venture, it's just so inspirational. It's so beautiful to think that you experience that, like, oh, it is done. Frodo cast the ring. It's just, it's so awesome. Anyway, please tell us the scenes.
well, yeah, no, but it gives justification for being as ambitious as you can possibly be.
Yes.
Right? That's the key to it. And you really have to just be fearless and relentless and just go for it. And even if it breaks fictional rules, or if it breaks whatever perceived rules may exist out there in terms of the creative process, if you're ballsy enough about it, eggsy enough, you can pull it off. It just takes, I guess, that kind of conviction, but also recognizing that you'll never get it right. But the act of having completed it, I mean, you must both know as creative people that when you complete a work, it's just like that's the reward.
Yeah.
Everything that preceded it was hard work. And so I've often described, I don't enjoy writing, but I enjoy having written. Two very different things, right?
One of my favorite quotes is finish the thing. Finish the thing. I love that.
Yeah. So there's, one other thing. And then the scenes. When I finish a creative thing, I don't know if this is like my personal defect, but I'll finish it and my immediate reaction is, I hate it. But I have to like put it away. So I do like charcoal drawing. I'll like finish it and be like, it's bad. And then I face it to a wall for like 2 weeks. And then when I turn it back around, I'm like, it's actually pretty good. I don't know if anybody saw, but I drew this thing. Did you have that moment at all of like needing to be like, I can't even look at you. I can't even, you've mentioned that you don't go back and read.
Yeah. Okay. Well, bear in mind that, when I finished the book, the only person who knew it from start to finish was me. Right. So, and then I had a whole year to wait before the book even got published.
Yeah.
Right. So that sense of, did I pull it off or didn't I? I don't know. And I won't know for over a year.
Wow.
And that's a tough span. Trust me, it's not easy. But also, I think by the time I finished those last few lines, underlying everything, I think there was a sense of abject failure, that it just had not. I had done everything that I wanted to do to the best of my abilities, and I had to sort of accept the fact that the best of my abilities may not be on the same level as my wishes for it to be. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the poem, I was kind of writing through the ashes of that. And so that melancholy was already descending on me by the time I got to the end of this thing. And I thought I probably wasn't going to write for another month after I finished, but a week later I'd started on Forge of Darkness. Wow. So I recovered pretty quickly. But it did feel like this was, having completed it for good and for ill, I could step out into that high street and get run over by a bus, and it would be fine. It would be fine, because what I set out to do, I had done.
Yeah.
And that was as far as I could take it at that time.
Well, so it reminds me of the first chapter of The Crippled God, the first scene of the first chapter, right, is Edgewalker talking to Cotillion and saying, even if you succeed beyond anyone's wildest expectations, they're going to criticize that. You felt
absolutely, absolutely, and especially since Dust of Dreams, because it was an incomplete novel, critically took more hits than anything else, right? So there was probably an element of me that was pissed off. And but also the foreshadowing of Cotillion with the two knives is
right.
It's just right there on the first page of this last book. Anyways, to the two scenes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
When I'm one of those people that listens to a podcast and then people get off the thing they were going to say, and then I'm like, go back to the thing you were going to say. And I'm so glad we're not doing that to people. So
no,
what were the scenes?
Well, one is the hilltop with the Marines, and the three lines that are uttered on that hilltop. Who are we fighting for? Everybody. No wonder we're losing.
No
So
laughter.
those lines were in my head.
Yeah. And you knew it was going to be a moment of laughter?
Oh, laughter was crucial to this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And other elements were crucial to it. And it's interesting because it stands in complete contrast to the next scene, which has to do with Tavor. So the neat thing about this one was I had those lines and I was writing up to it, and I was having to slow down because I kept thinking, who says those lines? Who delivers those lines? Which characters do I choose to deliver those lines? And I got closer and closer to the writing of it. And at some point, just before I'd set up the whole scene, and I don't know if it's Fiddler's point of view, but he's lying back, he's closing his eyes to rest, I think, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that it can't be anybody.
Yeah.
I cannot attach those lines to any character because it is everybody. And if you think about it in that pedantic fashion, if a reader looks at that and says, well, Fiddler has to know who spoke those lines, right? Because he knows his squad. He recognized the voice. So it doesn't, so in that sense, there's an internal logic that doesn't make sense, but it makes sense in the fictive sense. It makes sense structurally in terms of what I wanted to deliver at that point. Because that is where those three lines they're the entire series, right? Yeah. So, you could change it to, who am I writing for, right? and the answer is everybody.
Yeah.
And then the response is, no wonder, I failed. It's right. It's all laid in, but it's an expansive one. So it needed to be, those lines need to be unattached from any particular character. And once I wrote that out, I looked at it and I thought, that is the only way I could have gone on this one. Because if I'd attached any character names to those three lines, then the reader is taking their backstory with them. Mm-hmm. And it's actually muddying the impact and the intention of those lines. So sometimes structurally you have to break the rules, right? In a sense of, no, at this point, I'm going to pull back and disembody this exchange.
Man.
But also there was incredible pressure because I'd had that exchange in my head all those years, and I didn't want to fuck it up, basically.
Yeah.
So I had to slow down until I got to it.
It's possibly my favorite moment in the entire series, that moment and the leading to laughter. It is.
Well, as we were talking about before you started recording, tyranny's number one enemy is ridicule. And so, the impact of that laughter has upon the Fork of the Sail is also part of it. It's all part of sort of what's being delivered out there. And the ability of these people to laugh at the absurdity of their condition, of the human condition. It's the cliche of you either laugh or you cry. And in this case, the sheer helplessness and hopelessness of their cause and what they're up to just brings out the laughter.
It's something that I learned very young as a kid who got bullied a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If I could laugh and if I could make others laugh, I win.
If you can make the bully laugh, you've won.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I did a number of times, literally made the bully laugh to diffuse the situation. And it defined my entire life, right? So it certainly resonates to me. But what you're saying about the lines not being attributed to any particular soldier is so powerful and so profound. And I didn't think on it specifically like that, but having you spell it out, it's so perfect and so absolutely essential to having that scene work that way. And I think it accentuates. sorry, it accentuates the themes of the overall series. Also, in that there's always another voice in Malazan, right? There's always some other perspective. There's always, even the hundreds, thousands of named characters in the series that we get to know. There's always somebody else, and even right up until the very end, as we meet those regulars at the end of the book, there's always somebody else to be considered. And the fact that this voice just comes from that unnamed ether is so perfect, and so it just made that scene land. And it's wonderful to hear you point it out, because I didn't think about it specifically like that, but man, it's so true.
No,
you remember the moment. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just say, I really do feel like I remember the moment and not the individual, which is exactly what you're saying. But I've never felt it. I've never recognized that's how I felt about it, is feeling the whole space rather than the individual. That's great.
Yeah, but that's fine, because I don't think, in a sense, you don't have to, right? It doesn't have to be noticed. And so much of writing, at least the way I approach it, is if I can do something in such a way that it's not noticed, then I've done my job. Because then what it means is I've slipped past the critical filter of the reader and straight to their emotional base, right? It's just gone right past. So nothing has made them stop and sort of start dismantling or deconstructing what they just read, because something has dislodged them from the narrative stream. So in other words, I'm just slipping right past it by that. So yeah, no, I'm glad that, in a sense, that it was not noticed. But I think, had I attached character names to that stuff, you're right, Jeff, it would not have worked, or it would have been flatter. And it would have in many ways missed the point. But then we get to the other scene, which was also sitting in my head, which was basically, it's slightly extended, but it begins with Tavor's inarticulate cry. And that was her end point for her entire story. And of course, when you get to there, unlike the hilltop scene, which is a kind of an energetic expanding outward, universal in a sense, this is going straight inward, right? And it's going inward in the sense that her cry is basically, I don't know if I could explain why she lets loose that cry. Because in a sense, it's similar to the hilltop. It's everything, right? Everything that she's held in is now coming out. And she's never been an articulate character. So it makes sense that there should be no words attached to this. It's just the cry. But what follows, of course, is the essential part, with that echo of Felicin approaching with the helmet on, and Ganos approaching with the helmet on, which sort of wraps it. And what I'm hoping that it does for the reader is, where we've gone from that universal to the personal, well, this personal is 3 siblings, and one of them is missing. So there's no other line that Tavor could have said as the first line to her brother. No other line is possible, right? It's about the one who's missing. And it's about the burden that she has carried, not knowing, despite the fact that the reader has seen entire scenes where Lostera is standing 3 feet away from the adjunct, and she knows.
Yeah.
And the reader knows, but Tavor doesn't. So you can see the decision making on Lestar's part, because there's no way she's ever going to tell Tavor.
Right.
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 So you've got the three siblings, and one is missing, and so that is the connection on the very personal level. And all the way through, the last two books, there's been this notion of family, and I think Tavor reveals, certainly to some extent, in the last book, especially with her speech, and the interactions with the snake, is Badal names her mother, right?
Yeah.
So she is the mother of all of these, of her army, and so they are her children. So of course she would know them by name. She'd know them all, which in a sense doesn't make sense. I mean, there's no way you could, but for the purposes of this story, so there are families, and then there are families, and both of them are they've converged at this point, and that's why it's preceded by that cry, because that cry can't be afterwards. It has to precede it, because it has to embrace both her real family and the family that she has adopted, right? So it goes outwards.
Yeah. And we know that she's, we know that she is directly responsible for the death of Felicin, but she also feels, we know that her machinations put Felicin in that position, and she knows that, right? She knows that she had to, basically sacrifice Felicin for this greater plan. She put a bodyguard there. She tried to do what she could to protect her. She tried to, but ultimately she knows she failed, right? I lost her is her really understanding the guilt, right?
Well, lost her in the sense of not knowing her fate.
Right.
Right. And so she was trying to control that fate in a way that kept Felicin breathing.
Yeah.
Kept her alive. Because if she had not done anything, Felicin would have joined their parents in some fashion or another. And so the cull would have killed them. And of course, that's the real kicker, is that it is actually her brother who initiates the cull of the nobles, by his words to Lorne in Gardens of the Moon. So they're both absolutely culpable, if you will, to everything that's happened to their family. These three children.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those were the two scenes that just sat and getting to them and making sure that there was enough emotional burden that was placed on those two acts is what took 9.5 books.
Mission accomplished. that second scene in particular with Tavor, and I didn't think about it in exactly this way until you were just saying it, but I don't think there was a moment in the book that my anxiety level was higher than that reflection of that scene, and knowing Tavor. She's given everything she has, she's on her knees, but I'm like, I know she's gonna still, if she thinks that's somebody coming to try and take her out, she's not just sitting there. And knowing that it's this mirror of this scene, I was like, oh man, not again. No, it can't be this way. The tension of that scene, followed by the only distinct moment of extreme vulnerability, is so beautiful. I mean, I think that was their entire last book chat. I was like, I have to try and find a way to keep myself regulated when we talk about it, or I'll just weep. And I still did, but would have wept harder. I never thought about that as the smallest convergence of the book, where these huge factions sort of getting together, the biggest possible players, the biggest sort of power levels that we see across all the different magics that we see in the books. That is the smallest scale convergence of just the Paran family being together again, and the explosiveness of those emotions, and Tavor finally having somebody she can be open with finally having somebody who can carry her for a moment, just emotionally in that beat while they're thinking of their sister, they're mourning the absence of what should have been the third prong of this. I haven't thought about that as another convergence but that I think is just such a beautiful little, of course it is. Of course it is. I loved it. I really thought that scene was incredibly powerful.
I think you spoke a little bit to this, but one of the questions that I had, as you had these huge moments in your head for literal years, working toward them, you've spoken also about wanting to be able to surprise yourself in the writing. Is there? I mean, I think attributing those lines to no one maybe applies here, but is there anything else that surprised you on the road to those specific moments, or as those specific moments finally arrived, that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah. I cannot remember where Tavor's line first popped into my head. I had the inarticulate cry. But Tavor is an interesting experience as a writer for me in this novel. When I was at, in the writing programs, this was very much the era of the American short story, whether here in Canada or elsewhere, in Iowa. And the approach to writing that, your classic short story, your Raymond Carver-esque kind of story, is all about constraint and restraint. So you don't even think, the word climax in terms of fiction was a dirty word as far as these programs were concerned. You didn't have climax in a story, you had epiphany. So everything is constrained, everything is pared down to its barest minimum. And some writers, took that to extremes. So you think of Cormac McCarthy's The Road. That is the most pared down novel I think I've ever seen. It was so pared down it irritated the hell out of me. Did not enjoy it because I could see the affectation, I could see the obsession of reducing language to, in a sense, almost remove all of its potential for emotional connotation. Anyways, Tavor is that discipline applied to one character within a broader story that has all kinds of drama and climaxes and huge events. So the genre itself invites that, and it blows apart that sensibility of constraint, right? It's the opposite, if you will. But Tavor, as a character, was all of that constraint and restraint, all running all the way through the narrative. And so by the time you get to, I don't know, partway through The Crippled God, the last book, is when you first start seeing some of the cracks appear in the armor that's around her. And they're really small scenes, but they're these little glimpses of the human behind the adjunct as and the leader of the army. And that, it has to do with her hair, it has to do with
Right.
all kinds of things. But there's only a few of them, and so in that sense, all of that restraint is what is actually, that's what empowers the inarticulate scream, right? It's as if she is a fictional character, a real character, a human being who had lived in a Carver story and been dragged out of the Carver story, stuck in the middle of a fantasy novel, and just told to walk, right? Yeah. Eventually, it's going to explode, right? Because she's just stuck there.
Yeah.
So that was sort of, and for me as a writer, I have to admit, reluctantly, that it was probably the most enjoyable writing process of all of it. No matter how big the scenes were around her and all that kind of stuff, just to apply that discipline and that restraint on this one character was just a delight. It was just wonderful to go through.
It's interesting.
Then you kind of get to examine, your own feelings at reading that through the other characters, being like, oh, if she would tell us more. You kind of get to live that fantasy through the other characters as well. Yeah.
Well, that's what I loved, is that all the characters are saying, like, how is it possible for her to take this all on herself? How is it possible? And it's like, oh, guess what? It isn't. It isn't. No. She does have to have that moment of letting it all out. Like no one is that cold iron, right? No one can handle that much and take that much on themselves. And so you do see her crack, and then it all explodes out, and it humanizes her in such a beautiful way, because everybody had been talking about how she's doing this superhuman feat, and it's such a beautiful setup and payoff in that way.
And there's very few characters who get it before that happens, right? I would say Banishar gets it, Fiddler gets it, and so they express the emotions she should be feeling. They take it on, and so they're the ones that we get to see breaking down.
I think Banishar sort of secretly became one of my favorite characters, because the idea of this broken priest who is, what did you say?
Not ballistic?
Not ballistic. Not ballistic. No, not ballistic. No, but like this broken priest who, he's sort of given up on his own well-being. He's just become an alcoholic and just kind of, conceded his life into oblivion, but sees in this woman something to believe in again, and sort of reluctantly pulled into believing for her. It's just an awesome path that he goes on. When we first introduced to him, I didn't I didn't gravitate toward that character at all. But then as you see the path that he walks, and as you say, him being one of the few that actually sees her for what she's really attempting, it's pretty cool.
And even just that, Banishar, it's Banishar and Fiddler that she first goes to the place with all the swords on the ground to place the Atotterl blade.
It might be. I don't remember.
Yeah, I believe so.
But then she passes out, and even that big crack that we see before her cry of them sort of having her come to, and her first thought is not like, I got to get back on the thing. She's like, sorry, I look like shit. She's like, they're taking care of her, and she's still just like apologizing for the thing that she didn't keep grips on, in amongst all the things she's trying to keep a grip on. It's just so tragic, so sad to feel like she feels so responsible, but then also the whole book sort of saying that everybody else was not capable of having the focus that she was able to provide.
Yeah, and I mean, Blistic plays a huge role, right? Absolutely huge. He is the everyman who's objecting to the very reality of Tavor.
I mean, he makes a lot of sense a lot of times.
He makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's not unreasonable what he is saying and what he is thinking. And given his background, I mean, he's been betrayed by leaders before,
right?
In terrible ways. So, he's incapable of letting go of that distrust. But that's why he needed to survive the entire thing.
Yeah, I love the fight. The old man fight between those two, when they're all both too weak. I guess not old man, but more dehydrated man. But either way, the weakling fight between the two of them when they can't even do any actual damage to each other. That's a great scene.
So
go ahead. You.
I have a very trite question that is probably impossible for you to answer, but I think a lot of the times what questions that people ask us when we're sort of wrapping up and talking about things. Who's your favorite character? I mean, Tavor, I guess you're like, that was the most enjoyable writing, but do you have like a particular affinity for when you think about them? It's just like a little spark of joy when you think about the 453 characters that we were introduced to.
That's a good question. I mean, Tavor is certainly, I think I would name front and center. basically because I was applying a particular discipline that I'd learned in the writing programs that I basically stepped away from and had rejected for the rest of the um, of the writing in that series. Um, I mean, I enjoyed writing Iscaril Pust,
Yeah.
and his
Wackiness.
well, not only his wackiness, but also his, let's call it, dysfunctional marriage.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on, am I going to, I don't know if I'm necessarily pulled to heavy somber characters. There is that push and pull that is um, basically similar to what those soldiers did on the hill, where if you deliver a really heavy scene, you want to lighten it. You want to lighten the next scene in some fashion, right? So you want to relieve that pressure, because if you don't, then the writing can swiftly descend into melodrama, right? It becomes maudlin at that point.
Yeah.
So in terms of the creative process, I would use the humor and the absurdity as a release on the pressure valve, for myself as well, just to sort of get real again, if you will.
Of your many strengths as a writer, I would put that near the top of the list for me. Like I can't think of another author that I find has so well attuned sense of when to employ those different tonal shifts. It's masterful to, as a reader, to be just like, oh, he knows that I need this right now.
Well,
but also going both directions. Like you were able to take moments that feel so heavy and find levity and bring it light, but you're also able to take moments that feel so funny, i.e. Tay Hall saying, yo, you sleep with that girl yet? Got some supplies for you. Love you, bro. And Breeze going, he thinks I'm going to die. And like bring it down back to sort of keeping it level. And it's beautiful. Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just instinct, because, if it worked for you, or rather, that which worked for you worked for me first. You know what I mean? I had to do that. So
right.
I trusted in the fact that there will be enough other humans out there that would feel the same impulse and the same need when I feel those impulses and needs in the narrative. And so, again, it's. I was going to talk about this in a different context, but this is all about meeting the reader, the audience, on eye level, eye to eye, and there's a lot of fiction I read where the author is looking down on the audience.
Agreed.
And there's elements of contempt, I think, involved with that, but also a conviction that the job of the story is to convince the reader of a particular worldview, and that happens to be the author's. That kind of stuff, it drives me nuts. I don't like seeing it. It is so presumptuous. I don't know any author, and I've met many, who has some kind of unnatural understanding of the world that sets them above everyone else. It's just not the case. The whole point of the creative process is simply to try to throw shape against something that's ultimately ineffable and unknowable. And so this is how we sort of slap meaning onto existence. And I think that needs to be a humble act rather than an arrogant act. So yeah, it's meeting meeting the reader halfway across the bridge, and we both cross this distance, the same distance, and we're standing in the middle. And to me, I've always sort of that's always been, I guess, the underlying conviction that was going to give shape to the stories I was telling, was that this is a kind of a protracted conversation, and it's preceded by my protracted conversation with the world around me as well, right? So when I talk about the Mobius strip of the Crippled God, that's not original with me at all. You'll find it in Tim O'Brien's Going After Cacciato. That novel is a Mobius strip, extraordinary one. But for me, the biggest sort of inspiration to think of the series in this way is actually from a song. It's not from a novel at all. Should I go into that?
Please.
Are you at all interested? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Always.
Well, can you think of a song that's a Mobius strip?
A song that's a Mobius strip. I mean, I think structurally song, there, by virtue of the fact that they have refrains and choruses and verses that are repeated, it seems applicable to that form.
I can think of songs that are like you learn to sing like at like camp somewhere that are meant to be rounds, and so they're meant to be rounds, and then they have layers within them that are offset counter melodies and like different meanings of songs, sort of as a call and response almost, but they're not like truly intertwined. But they
call
really are.
Is certainly
never ending in a way that is fine unsatisfying. You just have to decide to stop.
Yeah,
you heard it here first. Malazan is based on "Row, Row, Row Your Boat."
Exactly.
Okay. So now take that notion of a song not meant to end and apply it to the story being told within the song.
I feel that, but the part that is like the second round of a round that's not meant to end, it's not changed the meaning of the song.
Right. So this is the song, okay? And this is the one that when I first heard it, I thought, oh, that's incomplete. It stopped early. It sounds like the beginning of a story, not the end of a story. And then I started thinking about it a little more. And then I went to the actual words and started deconstructing it and thought, oh crap, this is the most exquisite Mobius strip in a handful of stanzas I've ever seen. And it's Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower. That makes sense. That song just, so the opening line, there must be some way out of here, said the Joker to the thief. There's too much confusion, I get no relief. Businessmen drink my wine, plowmen dig my earth. None of them along the line know what any of it is worth. That's the first stanza. Then you go to the next stanza, and it's no reason to get excited. The thief he kindly spoke. There are many here among us who feel that life is but a joke. But you and I are not like that. And this is not our fate, so let's not talk falsely now. The hour is getting late. So let's stop at that point and look at those two stanzas. What is the thief talking about, and what is the Joker talking about? And
they're each talking about each other, right?
Yeah, it's completely inverted, right?
Right.
What the Joker talks about is what is issues of businessmen drinking his wine and plowmen digging his earth, not knowing the worth. So he's talking about value, right? And then we go to the thief, and he's saying life is but a joke, right? So it's completely inverted, which to me tells me that these two characters are one, and they're folding into each other. They're already folding into each other. And then the second half of the song switches point of view completely. And it's all along the watchtower. The princes kept the view, while all the women came and went, their foot servants too. Outside in the distance, a wild cat did growl. Two riders were approaching. The wind began to howl. And the song ends at that point, at least on the recordings, right? When he's done it live, he's actually on occasion, repeated the first stanza. And I think the song ends at that point to let the reader or the viewer the listener fill the gap. Because the gap is the two riders approaching are clearly the Joker and the thief, right? So if you then make the mental shift back over to the opening stanza, what's the line? There must be some way out of here, said the Joker. And the answer to that line is in that loop. No, there is no way out of here.
Right.
Ever. Right?
Right.
The story is just wrapping around itself over and over again. And the role of the Joker and the thief as sort of two halves of the same person, probably Bob Dylan, approaching this edifice of authority. It's not one prince, it's princes, right? So this is the establishment that these two riders are approaching, accompanied by howling winds and growling wildcat, right? So the ominous elements of it are just all built right into that song. So that one just, once I sort of did the deconstruction to my satisfaction, I mean, it was probably one of the most inspiring, pieces of writing I have ever seen. And it really fed into a lot of my thinking of how to draw oneself into a fictional space and have the two play off each other.
That
I don't know. That may have been a waste of time. I'm not sure.
That was
not
incredible.
at all. So one of the things in the book that, we've talked about and sort of attribute to things more like, history is bound to repeat itself if it's not learning from itself. And even Seven Cities in particular being like, it's seven cities stacked on top of each other. And then there's some kind of destructive event that did something that made another city pop up there. Do you feel like when you were deconstructing that and feeling that you were feeling that more as like, wow, that's a beautiful way to tell a story? Or did that map really cleanly onto like what you know of history and how you've researched and sort of engaged in your understanding of history as it unfolds and historians and how they archive?
Stop. I was not catching. Yeah.
You got a little the people who are listening won't hear any of that because it's all recorded locally on her end. But yeah, we had a hard time understanding what you were saying because you got a little internet-y. Not really.
I'll wait.
Oh, now you're back.
You're hello?
Good. Yeah, there you go.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So you're talking about Seven Cities?
Well, what I was talking about is you in your deconstruction of that song and that writing, were you like, that is like a beautiful way to sort of weave a plot? Or, we have talked in the past and it felt more like the common saying of like history is doomed to repeat itself if it's not learning from itself. And we talked about Seven Cities being like, there was a city, it's not seven individual cities, but a place where a city would be built and sort of broken down and then built again and then broken down. When you listen to that song and you deconstruct it, was it purely plot or did that sort of map well onto the other things you were engaged in, your understanding of history and your research there in how historians archive and what they talk about? Did those things really nicely fold together as you were ingesting that?
I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I know a bit about I went through a phase of Dylan everything, and so I got all the books, and so I do know there was some hint, anyways, that he was a reader of science fiction and fantasy when he was much younger, and it always made me wonder. I don't know if the timeline works, but when I first heard that song and the mention of the Joker and the thief, I thought Fritz Leiber's Fafford and Grey Mouser. It felt like those two characters, and especially the roles they play in stories, which is certainly posing, if you will, a wry but fairly direct challenge to authority in some fashion or another. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what inspired Dylan with the song. But I did. It's the one song that really seems to have, if not a fantasy element to it, then at least historical kind of connotations to it. But he uses that kind of stuff in many of his songs. A lot of his songs, and of course, a lot of it is biblically inspired as well. So it takes on the language of the Bible as well. So there's a lot of antiquity built into that song, which I adored.
AP talked quite impassionedly to Jeff and I about magic, and specifically the idea of magic systems being the way people discuss creating magic in fantasy worlds. Having spent a long time developing a unique expression of magic, how do you feel about the sort of systemization of magical expression? Was that something that like changed how people spoke about your work over the time it took you to write the novels, or do you have spicy opinions on magic?
I would say I don't think Lana has read your essay on that topic.
Good.
but no,
I love
happy
being
to
so uneducated.
No, I don't mean to throw you under the bus that way. I'm just saying I recognize that he is. This is a topic that Steve has a lot to say.
Yeah,
about, so.
yeah. I'm not a fan of magic systems within literature, because to me it is the diametrical opposite. Yeah, I mean, it is completely opposed to the original impulse of creating magic within a story. So you have to go back to mythology, or you go back to legends and folk tales and all the rest. What was the function of magic in those stories? And it's basically, I would describe it as evocation of wonder. And the flip side of that is an acknowledgement of an unknowable forces in the universe. So if its function is wonder, you cannot replace that with technology. And by that, I mean, you cannot turn magic into technology. Once you've done that, you've stripped the wonder from it because you've explained it. And so there's no sense of mystery. And that the function of mystery is crucial to the employment of magic in story, to my mind. And so, it may have hidden rules, if you will, that as the writer or the creator that you are cognizant of. So you created limitations of what can be achieved at any one moment, but you sure as hell don't have to explain them.
Yeah.
Right? All you have to do is describe it and basically leave it there.
I do think that's. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just say the way I think about it, there's that famous Arthur C. Clarke quote that I love of, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Well, the corollary for that is once you have described the technology, it's no longer magic.
It's no longer magic. You're absolutely right.
I feel like it's one of those things that my earliest memories when I think about reading Gardens of the Moon of like a place where I felt like my enjoyment really set in as a reader of the books is sort of a culmination of some of these ideas. I didn't feel like you were looking down on me as a reader. And I think through our first episode, I think my on repeat sentence, of which I almost always have one, was that I felt very trusted by you in the way that you wrote. And part of that was that there was not an explanation of like, well, okay, he opened his warren. Side note, let me explain what a warren is, what unfurling it means, what opening it means. Like, let's break it down. I was like, I had a moment as a reader where it's not even just the sort of incitement of wonder of like, wow, he did something I don't understand, but the invitation to imagine and sort of bring myself further into the world through the act of feeling like you're inviting me halfway across the bridge. And I it's something that I would never have been able to sort of define of that experience of being like, yeah, bring me in. I don't need every I don't need every perfect footnote to explain me the things along the way. But it was one of my great enjoyments of the books, is feeling like I had room to imagine what that meant for me, what any particular piece meant for me.
Cool. Very cool.
I don't mean to go backwards, but I can't stop thinking about what you said about All Along the Watchtower, and using it as sort of I guess an inspiration point for you to further. I just kind of want to dig a little into what you mean by how Dylan sort of puts himself in the narrative.
I think so.
Yeah, and so you found that as a sort of encouragement to give yourself permission to do that, which I think directly applies to this Mobius strip idea you were talking about with connecting Stephen Erikson to the Crippled God. I just find that so fascinating and so inspiring and such a profound notion. And I wonder if you can describe sort of functionally how that applied. Like, did you have in your head, as you were writing each novel, like, oh, I'm speaking as the Crippled God? How did you use that sort of inspiration point or that permission that you granted yourself to kind of let yourself be present? I don't know. I don't even know what I'm asking necessarily, but how?
I get it. No, I get it. At least I think I get it. Gardens of the Moon is the prelude. It's in a sense, that novel is doing in shorthand what I'm doing for the entire series, right? So it is an engagement with the tropes of fantasy, of epic fantasy. And that engagement is of the nature that those tropes are presented to the reader, they're set up, and then they're dismantled or they're unplugged or knocked over or kicked away, right? So
like an example of that would be the tyrant, the jagged tyrant being set up as this threat that's coming, and then it's sort of undermined at the end of the novel. Yeah.
And there's other ones. Crocus doesn't get the girl, this kind of thing, right? So those are all set up, and then they're knocked down, which is basically saying that, okay, this has to be a narrative and a story coming from a voice that is self-aware of the genre. So that's the meta element, right? Because I have to be aware of the genre. I have to have read all these books to recognize the tropes and to roll my eyes at them in this novel. So if there's that once sort of step back out of the genre that is in place in Gardens of the Moon, then it should be fair to follow for the reader that everything that follows Gardens of the Moon is also both inside and outside the genre. And so once you've stepped outside the genre, then you're looking at narrator, and what is the position of the narrator with respect to that genre? So, and the other hint that Gardens of the Moon is intended to provide is that I'm using literary conventions from other genres all the way through that novel. You can find Robert Ludlum in there. You can find Tom Clancy in there. You can find Frank Herbert in there. You can find Virginia Woolf in that stream of consciousness. So again, there is an acknowledgement, or this is coming from a voice that is not diegetically entrapped. It's not ensnared within the genre as if, okay, here's a great example. How many science fiction novels or science fiction shows have you watched where it's very clear that whatever universe that may look like ours that they're in has no acknowledgement of the existence of Star Trek as a cultural phenomenon in their background?
Yeah.
Right? It's just not there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's where the creators have trapped themselves inside that fictional universe they created, which does not allow for cultural forces or from outside that to actually impact and give shape to part of that narrative.
Right.
And now a lot of stuff now has gotten a bit more clever with regarding that, and yet they will get that kind of commentary, right?
Yeah.
Generally more in comedic fashion than anything else, but it still needs to be there. And you'll find it even in the MCU films,
Yeah.
right?
So, yeah, I think Superman is canonically a comic book character in the MCU.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So it's starting to, it's starting to deconstruct itself in that fashion. But bear in mind that this is decades ago that I was writing this. So I was sort of thinking in terms of everything sort of having that element of almost tension between the narrative voice and what it knows and the story that's being told, if that makes sense.
These kind of objectives, were you always able to define that methodology as you were writing, or is it something you gained with more clarity as you wrote and understood more about the distance or lack thereof between you and the book and the characters in the book?
My obsession with meta narratives began really early, and when I came here to University of Victoria and just started writing, I think I only had 2 stories behind me, 3 stories, I guess, which is what got me into the program. So I was brand new at the idea of writing. I thought I was going to be a comic book artist, and that's sort of. I certainly spent most of my school time drawing, as opposed to anything else, and I had the grades to prove it. So,
do you still draw?
No.
Maps,
If
baby.
I'm writing, I can't paint. Huh. If I'm painting, I can't write. It draws from the same well, I think, creatively. And now I'm so out of practice now, it would be kind of hopeless. But anyways, so what was I saying?
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to.
No, it's okay.
The enjoyment of meta narratives early on.
Yeah. So I come to UVic, and it's at the time period in terms of what was being talked about and discussed in contemporary fiction was a lot of the postmodern wave of metafiction. So self-conscious fiction aware that it is fiction. And that was sort of reading one short story after another of that kind of stuff. And it didn't take me long to realize that this is about as subtle as a hammer over on the top of your head. There was no subtlety involved there. And so I remember thinking, well, is it even possible to be subtle with your metafiction as opposed to over the head, all the signs pointed at this is metafiction, right?
Yeah.
Which always struck me as really self-indulgent, I guess. And an affectation. So it becomes a gimmick short story as opposed to a story about people and real things. And fair enough, these writers were breaking apart the narrative structure that had always been in place, and they were experimenting with it and challenging it, and a very worthwhile endeavor. But it always struck me as being way too obvious and too much signposted. So then I was becoming obsessed with the notion of, can you do a meta-narrative that is so subtle it's not noticed that it's a meta-narrative by the reader? And so that question is what sort of ultimately led me to the entire Malazan Book of the Fallen, because that's what I'm addressing. That's what I'm asking, is can it be subtle enough? And then when you get to the end of it, can you then create a reveal, if you will, that completely inverts everything that preceded it?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do? What does that do to the reader for looking back on what they've gone through in these 9.5, 9 3/4 books? How do they recontextualize on the basis of the revelation of who is telling the story within the diegetic realm? And then, having done so, do they then recognize or realize that the crippled God has to actually move outside of the diegetic universe of that story? And if it comes outside, where's it going? Well, it's the Mobius strip. It lands on Stephen Erikson. So, and those were sort of the broadest strokes of what was impelling me to structure the novel, the series, the way I did.
So having
I gotta
that,
say, wait, I gotta say just real quick. I'm sorry, real quick, Lana. I want you to follow up, but I just want to say I think we have proven that this Mobius strip metaphor has worked. So I want to tell AP
good.
he can suck it
Good.
because. Sorry, go ahead, Lana.
Cool.
No, so subject matter, obviously, like it changes through the book. Which characters we meet a bunch more of them, but knowing that objective of getting this Mobius loop, getting that subtlety and meta narrative, was there anything that you felt changed the most in your writing approach or style from book 1 to book 10, or was obtaining that consistency, obtaining that subtlety throughout such a focal point that it was more about how do I maintain this approach the whole time?
No, you're right. It evolved. It evolved in a very curious way. How would I describe this? Okay, so quite often I think a writer will choose a narrator or a narrative, but no, a narrator, to establish a kind of distance between themselves personally and their personal world and their personal experiences and their feelings. Establish a distance between that and the story they're going to tell. Now, they may take elements of what they've experienced and what they're feeling and sew them into that story, because that is what compels somebody to tell a story and to write that. But there's still the need and the necessity to keep that once removed, and it's a self-protection mechanism, because if you lay yourself out completely on the page and then it goes out to the public, I mean, there's nothing more vulnerable than that experience, right?
No
Even
kidding.
if the public simply is a workshop with 8 other wannabe writers, 3 of whom are hungover, and it's like, and none of whom are your chosen audience,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's one of the drawbacks to. It's one of the things you need to be aware of in a workshop, is that this is not your audience, and so
Yeah.
and even the instructor is not your audience, unless you want to specialize with a very, very small audience, which is some people do. But it is so vulnerable that, in terms of protecting yourself, you maintain that slight distance, and in a sense, even though you're maybe heading for something on the page that has an emotional context, or can at least reach through to a reader's emotional state, you're still doing it with some reserve, right? Like, you're holding back. What I found was, as the series progressed, and I became more comfortable with my meta presence within the narrative, I was being dragged closer and closer to the surface of the story. And so as I proceeded, I just got, in a sense, I got more and more vulnerable because it was getting closer and closer to that distance just was collapsing, just disappearing.
Was that scary or was it cathartic?
Oh, was it ever? Yeah. I mean, it was. And I mean, part of that, the experience of the fear, you can't live with that forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
The spirit can't withstand that. So by the time I got to the opening of the Crippled God and the final run here, I mean, the echo of those two knives being drawn by Cotillion perfectly matched my mood, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I was at that point. So
yeah,
you move past the fear to defiance. And
take me home, Cotillion. Let's go.
Yeah. So, and of course, it had to be Cotillion because in the gaming, that's the character I played when I was running the campaign for Cam as Kellenved. So I was always Cotillion. So my fictional character, my game character, has to be the one to deliver the release of the fictional, quasi-real me, Crippled God, chained in this world, in the Malazan world, has to be let loose. So it has to be Cotillion who does that.
And that's just for you, right? That's not no reader is going to get that point. That's just for you. Yeah. But it's important. It's still important. That's awesome.
The writer, the artist needs that fire in the belly, that internal drive. And no, you're right. It's not for everybody else. It's the thing that it's your fuel. It's what you need and it's what you use. I remember I had some sessions with my first creative writing instructor, Jack Hodgins, a writer who I didn't know him before I came to the program. But then I read some of his stuff. He was one of those people who could create these outrageously funny scenes as the climactic elements of his stories, but very human, very heartfelt. And I think by the end of the first year of me putting in stories, I was in complete crisis mode because I said, I read your stuff and I see the joy of life in your writing when I was talking to Jack in his office. But then I look at my fuel and my fuel's a lot darker. And, there's a ferocity there. There's just darkness to it. Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me and he said, well, when I write those scenes, I laugh first. And that sort of, and then he said, it doesn't matter what the fuel is, as long as you got the fuel, right? You will use it any way you want, any way you have to. And that sort of took some pressure off, because then, in a sense, I didn't need to. Oh, you can't fake it, anyways. But I was now aware of where that there was a lot of darkness in the things that were driving me into the creative process. And it's the usual cliched list of family dysfunction and crap like that you grow up with, all the woundings that we all experience. I mean, high school is the realm of woundings. It's more than anything else, and we all go through that. So you're going to have some kind of emotional residue from all of those experiences, and if you can find a way to be creative with it, it almost reforges that into something positive, just by the act of being creative with it. So then that took the pressure off, and then at that point, I felt much more liberated in terms of letting myself use the fuel without feeling guilty for it.
Yeah. So you finish the Crippled God. It feels like this beautiful burden has been lifted from you. You have your character freeing your other character in a very dramatic and powerful and physical fashion, you take a week-long breather. Did it feel like you were donning more chains in that moment? Or did it feel like you're like, this is embracing that outlet, lighting some more fuel to get going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I knew that one of the things that I learned early, this is probably why almost none of the short stories I wrote in my undergraduate workshops are still with me. I mean, they've all been tossed. They're gone.
Fully tossed?
They're all gone. Yeah.
Oh,
They were all me exercising and exploring the stuff I was learning. And so, I mean, yeah, they're exercise books, but in short story form. And I think probably, I lost my train of thought there. So, okay, what were we talking about? Just step
talking
back.
about whether or not the after you felt like you released yourself
New
from
chains.
the Crippled God. Yeah.
So this was the undergraduate, especially, but also in Iowa as well. I was exploring different styles of writing. So the way the workshops are set up, I think you put in 3 stories per term. I think that was the number. None of my stories would be immediately recognizable as coming from the same person. So I was exploring styles all over the place. And it related to all elements of narrative structure. So sentence length, diction, sentence patterns, paragraph patterns, point of view, tense, you name it. I was exploring everything. So by the time I got to the last year of that, I was pretty comfortable with shifting styles, and being able to embrace those styles completely. So the Malazan Book of the Fallen is a particular style, deliberately selected for the telling of this particular story. So after I finished it, I thought, well, yeah, I need a break from that style. So I need to sort of dust off, the stuff I'd been messing around with all those years ago, and sort of rediscover through a different style, just the sheer enjoyment of language. And that's what sort of led me to how I was thinking of the Carcanis trilogy and Forge of Darkness.
Cool.
And one of the things I wanted to do, I think I may have mentioned this before, but the 10 books, the audio rights were already held by the publisher. And that's relevant in the sense that for whatever reason, when they decided to bring in a reader and produce the audio versions of this stuff, I was not contacted.
That's cool.
So the person doing the reading, this is early enough so that there wasn't a standard practice in place. So he never contacted me either. So all the pronunciations were just, wow, where did they come from? Not only that,
did you say
accent.
shurkalali?
Yeah,
whatever.
And he had a British accent as well, and was applying all kinds of regional dialect to various characters to create some variation in the voices. Yeah. All of which just sort of had me blinking, and not quite understanding any of this. So I thought, well, okay, there's a lot that goes on in turning the written word into audio, into a narrative, a spoken word. What if I reverse that and go back to the notions of writing as if it's meant to be spoken? And so I I had I think one of the first Kindles, and you could download the collected works of Shakespeare for free. So I did, and so that week that I spent, not writing, I was reading, and I read it all. And what happens to me when I read, especially particularly strong voices in the author, or even in this case, cultural distinction, because of the time difference and how language has evolved. I absorb like a sponge. And so what I picked up from that was sort of a new appreciation for cadence. And when I sat down to write what I thought was going to be probably my most successful novel, which turned out to be one of my least successful novels in terms of sales, Forge of Darkness, I wrote it all in breath length, so that when the guy who ended up reading it, and he did contact me because protocol was in place now. And so we got to get all the pronunciations down pat and all that kind of stuff. But he said, I mean, it was effortless to read as audio because it's all breath length. Wow. And that was an interesting challenge, but seductive as hell. I mean, once you fall into it, it just flows along.
When you're writing like that, are you speaking out loud to yourself?
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
I don't think so. But I'm aware that it can be spoken out loud, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's cool.
But the other thing I absorbed, of course, was fairly complex diction and construction of sentences from Shakespeare. So that may have pushed a few potential readers away. But I think it may have been as much that there was Malaz fatigue by that point, by the time the Carcanis books first came out. Although, I mean, there are people who enjoy those two books, but they're few and far between. So, but for me,
we will circle back to them at some point for sure. I know that we will.
I mean, especially if you're like, oh, Shakespearean inspired Malazan books. I'm like, isn't that like Jeff Kanata catnip?
That's like my catnip. Yeah. I was going to say, speaking as somebody who's performed a fair amount of Shakespeare, not always breath length.
No. You're right.
Yeah. Who's Brett?
Yeah. No. And I realize that too, but it's declamatory, right?
Yeah.
That's what I liked. I really liked that notion of, okay, if I'm going to write something that is deep into the Malazan past, there needs to be something within that style that echoes that antiquity. And so that's what I took also from the Shakespearean construction. And so the characters do declaim quite often. Wow. And it's as if they're standing on stage. And right. I like that.
Cool.
But I don't think the average modern reader is going to be too accessible to that kind of thing. I don't think it doesn't seem that way, anyways.
Well, I'm more intrigued to read it than ever. This is maybe a silly question, but how did you know it was going to be 10 books?
Very early on, I came up with 10 titles. I start with titles. And that was it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like such a wild challenge to throw down before yourself of like, I know this is it's going to take me 10 novels to get there. It's just audacious.
Well, that's that notion of ambition also. But I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to do something that was really big.
Although mission accomplished, as Nana would say.
Yeah. Although initially, uh, that was not pitched as a 10-book series.
Oh no! Oh, you
No,
mean
no.
Gardens of the Moon wasn't pitched as a 10-book series?
Absolutely not. No,
Yeah.
because
But once Deadhouse Gates happened, you're like, there's 9 more of these.
yes,
Yeah.
and my agent knew, but he said,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell them that, because publishers. I mean, think about it. It's a brand new writer who's then promising 10 books. Give me a break,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Let's see the first one. And how long did it take you to write the first one?
Right.
So, yeah, so that was not part of the initial pitch.
Yeah.
But then I made it pretty clear partway through Deadhouse Gates that, yeah, there's 10 books here.
There are kind of 3 beautiful plot arcs. Like, I mean, there's a million little plot arcs, but like Bridge Burners, Bone Hunters, Tavor's final act. Yeah. Did you ever consider breaking it up into some kind of trilogy of trilogies when you were debating how to present that?
Yeah. And, there was precedent for that. Stephen Donaldson certainly did that with his Covenant stuff. Yeah. But it wouldn't have made sense because there was this overarching story that was requiring 10 books.
Yeah.
And so for me, as an anthropologist, I was massively rejecting Joseph Campbell's oversimplification of cultural practices and belief systems. So I did not really want to just expand the hero's journey across 10 volumes. And I didn't want to explore the hero's journey in that fashion anyways. Yeah. But it did occur to me that anybody who actually stays with me for the 10 books is, in a sense, taking a hero's journey of their own. But it's the reader. And that may sound presumptuous, but that's kind of how I just thought, well, that's how I'll deal with the hero's journey, is I'll externalize it to the reader. Cool. And if they stay with me for the 10 books, then in a way they've done that. So, it had to be three trilogies. It just, what that invited was somebody reading one of the trilogies.
Right.
And stopping.
Yeah.
In which case they've not completed the journey.
You get that, you let them off the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have another sort of structural question. Obviously 9 and 10 are one book, as you've mentioned before, but one of the big parts of Crippled God that we haven't even touched on in this discussion at all, and it's a huge part of the book, is the shake and the showdown at the light wall with the Taisliosin. I'd love to talk about why that is alongside this book, and because it seems to me it could have been like that could have been book 9, and then all the other stuff could have been book 10. You could have, instead of sort of cross-pollinating it through both of those books. I'm wondering why that decision was made.
It's a good question. I really don't know. I mean, the Carcanis trilogy sort of planted its seed in my head during the writing of Toll the Hounds. Because there I was writing some flashbacks that were going right back to that, and introducing Endis Salan and introducing Sandalath du Corlat. So that back history was already starting to populate my imagination. And so the whole Shake storyline is directly linked to the Carcanis trilogy.
Yeah.
And so that's why it sort of runs as a new thread gets introduced and slowly works its way through the last few books, the last 2 books.
Yeah.
3 books, I guess. Well, no, the Shake stuff's the last 2 books. And so also it was a kind of a warm up, if you will, for what was going to happen after those scenes. But I also like the idea of Yed and Derek actually being by far the nastiest of the most badass of all of the sword fighters.
Oh yeah,
and the fact that, again, very inarticulate and broken. So that's kind of echoing, I guess, to Vor.
Well, it's also functionally like really fun from my perspective that, you know, our final two sort of big antagonists are Light and Justice, you know, with Tice Leosin and the Fork of Sale. I think that marries very well in the last pair of novels. So it worked. I was just curious if that thought had ever.
Yeah,
because they do feel sort of compartmentalized. You know, it's like we got the Shake stuff going on over here, and then we got everything else going on over here. You know, so
yeah, but also it again, I'm holding back on revealing, getting to those final scenes, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a long digression, and if you're going to make a digression like that, there better be a payoff for it, right? So those final scenes. Those final scenes have to be worth that digression.
Well, the digression has a payoff too. I mean, we have some freaking awesome dragon battles.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Man, I don't want to wrap this up. This has been amazing. I think this has been the most fun I've had yet. Like this has been really a blast. But go ahead, Lana. What
I was going to say, I have like one key question because I don't want to wrap it up. I typically have to wrap it up because I got to scoot. But one of the things, knowing, you know, of course we want to ask you, what's your vote for where we're going next? But one of the things I thought about is you've been alongside us for so much of the journey. I mean, you found the DLC Book Club so early on. As an author, do you have thoughts or advice or feedback for us as we continue in our journey and how we interact with books? And end of question.
You have the best format I've seen by far. And speaking, you know, selfishly as a writer who's comes on and watches you go through things. There's nothing more gratifying than your reading of quotes at the end of the section, at the end of the day. Sometimes it's intimidating because it's shit that I write that. I can't write that now. But
you're
at the same
intimidating
time,
yourself retroactively.
Yeah. And I don't know, is that a product of age or is it just, I don't know. So no, I think your approach, and I like the irreverence of your approach as well. I don't know if all authors will, but I do. I love it. You know, I love it when you do riffs on naming conventions and all that kind of stuff. It's a blast. And you know, when you act out like Shadow Throne or whatever, right? So
there's a couple commenters who are also not as much of fans of our irreverence.
Really?
But they're clearly very reverent of you.
we've gotten an email or two where people are like, I can't watch you anymore. You don't take this seriously enough. And I was like, well, sorry.
We're unserious people.
Isn't that the scene on the hill? I mean, yeah, you've got to laugh, right?
I agree.
Yes. And so, no, I love it. It's great.
I'm pleased by that.
And so, yeah, I keep doing what you're doing. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, on that note, then, do you have a contender for where we should go next?
I'm very uneasy about suggesting anything. Well, I mean, it's. I think that what your fans are suggesting has more validity than what what I would be able to suggest as a writer, because I've got my own biases, right? So, yeah, I mean, I understand that you don't want to be sort of the Malaz channel. So, I'm hoping that at some point you'll switch over to Ian Eslamont stuff, to Cam stuff.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable. I think we're gonna do that. We'll do the Carcanis novels. We'll do the Witness novels. I think that's inevitable. I just think that, we want to, zig before we zag.
Yeah,
We'll have a nice place to come home to.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as a palate cleanser, certainly standalone novels would do that, because it means you don't have to commit to anything beyond that one particular novel. I mean, if you both like science fiction, there's some pretty cool standalones in that area as well.
So you're not going to give us like a title?
Sure, but it's the one example I can give you is the author is no longer with us. So
yeah,
and that would be Ian Banks, his culture novels. Consider Phlebas, I think, is the first one. And I do think there's it's like you have an opportunity with the living authors, right?
Yeah.
That there's a ticking clock on that one.
Yeah.
So
I mentioned that to Lana as well. I was like, I think that is really a special thing that I would like to continue to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Becky Chambers would be her science fiction work. I think it would be quite interesting. Yeah, I'm like I said, you don't know her? Oh,
I don't.
Okay, cool.
I actually recognize the cover of the books. But
she won the Hugo Award for Wayfarers, right? Yeah.
Wayfarers?
The Wayfarers series.
It's a series, yeah.
Yeah.
It's generally, I only know the specific titles. I didn't know the series had
To Be Taught, If Fortunate. Oh, these are novellas.
She has interesting titles.
A Psalm for the Wild Built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do not know her,
but go. I mean, she. I would recommend you start at the beginning of her stuff.
Cool.
And if you like it, then and they're not particularly long, so they're quite self-contained, which is quite sweet.
That's one of the things that has been interesting to think about, like, what would be like our next series? And no matter what, I'm like, all right, the next 3 years. I'm like, well, actually, no, maybe the next 6 months.
Yeah.
I feel like the precedent
2 months.
What
about that?
All right, Becky Chambers on the list. I'm taking notes.
Like it. All right. Well, you mentioned that you like the fact that we read passages. If you'll indulge me, I would like to read another passage that I don't think Lana has read. But this comes from an essay that Steve wrote. I believe it's on reactormag.com. It's the Tor website. And I will try not to get too emotional reading it because I think it's beautiful. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is just a section. Is that okay? May I read this?
Sure. I have no idea.
It's written in your voice in the first person. So I'm
right. Okay.
It is very presumptuous of me to read it with you here, but I'm going to do so anyway. All right. Compassion is a plea. I voiced it through 10 straight novels. Of that, and as I see that virtue die day by day around me in that depressing deluge of despair and stupidity we call the news, I have nothing left to give. Now, don't take that as self-pity. It isn't. It would be without the existence of the Malazan Book of the Fallen, for me, that is. But the series does exist. And in it, I said everything I had to say, in as many ways of saying it as I could. That voice has run its course. And I know, for good or ill, that it was the best I could do. And if that isn't good enough, then nothing is. And maybe that's another part of that shadow, the whispering thought. Maybe nothing is good enough, I mean. A notion leading me back yet again to my ongoing reconciliation with failure. Compassion as a plea is actually a complicated idea. It demands so much of the reader, and so many rejected the request, as was and is their right. And for me, no harm, no foul. And then when the reader accepts, it demands still more of them. Sure, the plot says, engage your brain for this, you'll need it. But the story says, now engage your feelings. And yes, if I can, I will make you cry and grieve and hopefully come out the other side feeling strangely elated, with life shining a bit brighter than it did before. It's a big ask because it wants your trust. And the only trust I could offer in return was this promise. It will work out in the end. We will end up in a place open and solemn and brimming with love. Because, and this is so obvious and so simple, it hurts to say it. You can't know compassion without love. Of course, the only way for me to say that was to assure you that I knew what I was doing and where I was going. But sometimes that's not enough. Well, I want to say, Steve, that it remains enough.
Thank you. And mission accomplished, man.
Yeah. I hope you realize how much this process has meant to Lana and myself, and so many of the people that have gone along with it, along with us on this journey. And I'm sure you have received over the years, many notes of gratitude and appreciation, but we want to add to that pile and just because you have engaged with us and been so open and so generous and so caring and allowed that in your work as well, it has had a profound effect on me and always will. So well,
thank you.
I'm extremely grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And this isn't the end. So I'm just saying that we're going to bug you in the future. So sure. Get ready for that, because I can't imagine, not chatting with you at some point again in the future, because it's just such a delight. So thanks for sharing your time and your art with us.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you choose. What you're going to choose next. Interesting.
Yeah. What the community chooses, because one of the beautiful things that we're doing is we're going to lay out the slate, and we are going to put our fate in the world's hands and see where we go next. So I can never speak as eloquently as Jeff or you, but thank you for trusting us as readers and with your presence, and trusting us to have these conversations with you has just been invaluable, really invaluable.
Always an even exchange.
Well said. Well quoted. All right, everybody. Thanks for being with us. We will, the Discord is a great place to find out what comes next. Again, we're going to put this up for a vote as to what we're reading next. Landon and I might be doing something a little silly next week. You'll see. Stay tuned. Hope you're subscribed. Cool. We appreciate you. And thanks again, Steve, for being with us.